necklaces and other jewelry, I fear. But so what in this unit review is troublesome to you, if anything? What do you just not, are you just not sure that you understand or know? Is there anything that falls in that category? Go ahead, Luke. Okay, so vocabulary. A lot of this is endings. Let's go over these sentences. All right, this is on page 189. These sentences that they gave you, and just let's go through. Did you check this? And did you get them right? Oh, okay. Well, maybe we don't need to go over them. I don't want to burden you with stuff that we know already. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Instead of that, I have for you a test. Latin Alive doesn't have a unit test. They only have a unit review, so I made one, which means I usually am easier than other people. I'm just easy. I'm going to tell you flat out what's on this test. However, when you do it, I don't want you to look in the book. All right? So that's your first thing to do this week is, and Ava, you've got one being emailed to you. Vocabulary. I ask you, what do these words mean in English? What are these words in Latin? I say, give the Latin for each of the following. If it is a noun, give me the nominative, genitive, and gender. Because you have to know all of those to use it. If it is a verb, give me all 4 principal parts. Right? And that's it. Next page is decline the following nouns. What's the trick here? Well, we need to know our endings. And we also need to be able, and I'm so terribly sorry. Look what I did. There's not enough space there for you to do it. All right. You can just do it on the back or something. Okay. I'm sorry. I don't know why I did that. You also need to know how to decide if one of these nouns is an I stem. So let's just take a moment, and can you remind me, if you look at a noun and you decide it's third declension, how do you know if it's a third declension I stem or just a third declension regular? For example, let me just write a few of them on the board. I wish I had my... Okay. Homo, hominis. Herbs, herbis. I'm just going to write some random, okay? Nawis, nawis. What are some other third declension nouns that you know? Let me go back to virtus, virtutis. Okay, that's enough. I'm going to tell you flat out 2 of these are I stems and 2 of them aren't. Do you know which are which? The first one is not. This is true. Oh, okay. No, that means no. Yes. I should have made that a frowny face. It made sense. We'll talk about why in a minute first, because you must have a reason. Well, actually, John, can you tell me? Okay, because if I have a nominative and a genitive and they're exactly the same, novice, novice, or if they have the same number of syllables, I'm trying to think of one. Sometimes the nominative ends in es in these. I don't think you've learned any of those yet. Why? It doesn't. Herbs, one syllable. Herbis.
Oh, then it has the same. You take away the. Yeah.
And what are you left with? You're on the right track. You're so on the right track. You're left with something important. Do you remember what it is, Luke? 2 consonants. Right. So pars, partus. That's one of these. If I take away the is, okay. But look at this one. Here, I'm tired of rubbing it with my fingers. If I take away the is, it only has 1 consonant at the end, in. I mean, it has more consonants in the actual word, but I mean 2 in a row. And if I look at virtus virtutus, it just has a T. So it is also not. All right. So you're going to have to be able to pick out. Some of them are istems, some of them are not. Now, what if it's a noun like donum? Could this be an istem? No, why not? It's not even third declension. If it's not third declension, it's out. There are no istems in other declensions. Okay, good. All right, so that's something you're going to need to know, but it's that sounds like I've reminded you. What if I? Oh, okay, here it is. We're blaming everything on the weather today. I'm just tired. Okay, now I have a section, took it straight out of the book. Do you remember the deal where they gave you a noun and then they gave you an adjective in parentheses and you needed to give the form of the noun that would, or the adjective that would go with noun? Okay, for example, I even gave you an example here. I'm going to show you the example on the board, okay? Because I want everybody to excel here. Like, I want to give you everything you need to do this great. I did something like this. I wrote this noun. Does anybody remember what this noun means? I like this one. Because after I tell you something about it, you will never forget it again. What is a hosta? I know. No, it's not. It means spear. But why is the hosta plant called for the Latin name for spear? Think about what a hosta looks like. Look at the leaves. Yeah, like spearheads. As far as I know, that is why a hosta is called a hosta. All right, so hosta means spear. So I give you hostai, and then I put acer in parentheses. Do you remember what acer means? Acer, acris, acre. It's one of these third declension. Sharp. So I gave you a word for spear, and I want you to put the right word for sharp to go with it. Now, first of all, I have to figure out what is going on with this ending. So this is me taking the quiz. I'm going to have to figure out, okay, I, am, I, arum, is, as, is. So it's either this, or this, or this. Now, I am going to give you guys a gift. If you do any of the ones it could be, it's right. You don't have to give me every one it could be. All right? Now, I also have to know something about acer. What are its endings? Okay. And by the way, what gender do you think hosta is? It's feminine because it's first. So I'm just going to do the feminine endings because acer, acris. So acris, acris, acri, acrem, acri. Remember the ablative has an I for weird reasons. Acres, acrium, acribus, acres, acribus. Those are my acer endings. And it's either this one, or this one. So if on my test paper I write acris, acri, or acres, those would all be right answers because they all match, right? In this case, they'd be genitive and singular, or dative and singular, or nominative and plural. Does that make sense? This is on your paper. Like I wrote that whole, I even wrote down what form of acere goes with hostile, and I wrote one of the answers. I did not write all three. And then the rest of it, I just have sentences for you to translate. Oh, that's not true. Next section, I have some sentences. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I did not ask you to tell me what the job of everything is. I just asked you to translate them. And then last, I asked you to conjugate copio, one of our I stem third conjugation verbs. Everything that was on here. That's it. That's it. Do that to the best of your ability without looking in the book and bring it back to me. I am not sending home a key. Don't look for a key. There is no I am the key. I am the key. I did not type one up. Okay, so that is the first thing I want you to do. The second thing is that I talked about this earlier, we have 5 more weeks after today. And suddenly it gave way. And I am not going to ask you guys to memorize the 30 ways to say this and these. There are 30 ways to say, well, 15 ways to say this and 15 ways to say these. But I just don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think it's in your best interest. As far as I know, Luke, your mother, whether you know this or not, has said you will take Latin next year. It can be negotiable. It's between the two of you. But I don't think John is. I don't know if Preston is. So
I might be taking the first semester, but I'm in college next year.
okay, that's what your mom told me that you were going to take classes down there. So, and you can't do everything. So I actually made copies out of Wheelock's Latin. And for the next 5 weeks, we're going to take a look at the book we're going to use next year. And so you're going to jump on that if you do it. We're going to move through it slowly. It'd be lovely if we could get through the first 3 chapters. The good news is it's almost all going to be review. We're going to solidify what we've learned. And I'm guessing I'm going to be ready with chapter 2 next week because I think you're just going to dash through this. But let me show you a little bit how it's laid out. I didn't Xerox the whole chapter. But actually, Preston, let me give you that. Can I let you guys look on together so I can have one, and then I'll give the other one to you. All right. So on the first page, I have the vocabulary list. Almost all of these words you should know, I think. Many of them you should know. Can you find me? Tell me any of these words you haven't already learned. I should have gone through and done this for myself, but I didn't. Are there words there that don't seem familiar to you at all? Maybe at the top, like see and saipe, but the verbs. Are there any of the verbs that don't look familiar to you at all? Maybe salvio and walio? There are a couple. Let's take a look at these words. Do your best to learn these words, all right, and their principal parts. But many of them you are already familiar with. But let's look at the top first. Me means me. This is really easy because it looks like me. In Latin, we just say me. It just means me. Quid means what? Nihil means nothing. It means something. But the something is nothing. Non means not. You already knew that one. Saipe means often. That's from back in the Memoria Press. Semper and saipe, we learned those, right? And si, si means if. These are little words they're going to throw into the sentences that they have you do. All right? Are we good? All right. Let's look at the verbs. In this list, they have given you second conjugation and first conjugation verbs. How do I tell the difference? For example, can you look at that list and find me a first conjugation verb? Cogito. How do you know it's first?
Because of the ARE instead of ERE.
So the infinitive has an ARE. So every one of those that has an ARE, they're first. Find me a second conjugation verb.
Video.
Video. It's got a long ERE. Video videre. Weedy weesome. All right. Let's remind ourselves of how we conjugate those in the present tense. Let's do cogito first, and then we'll do video. Remember, this is only present tense is all they're going to use in this chapter. This is easy for you guys. Remember, cogito, cogitas, cogitat, cogitamus, cogitatus, cogitant. Tell me how to translate cogitat. And cogito means think, by the way. So what would cogitat mean? He, she, or it thinks. Translate it another way for me. John, you used to be really good at this. This was your master. You were the master of the 3 ways to translate. Uh-huh. Is thinking. I'm just going to say he. He is thinking, he thinks, or he does think. Those are all okay. So if you see that in a sentence and they ask you to put it, or something, and they ask you to put it into Latin, is thinking, does think, these are all present tense, okay? Now, how is that different from video, which is a second conjugation? Video, wides. Remember, there's no A. Widet. Videmus, videtus, vident, right? They all have an E. Well, they do all have an E because that one has an E too. And the same thing applies. He sees, he is seeing, he does see. We good? All right. There's one more thing, 2 more things I want to mention about the vocabulary list. Each verb has 4 principal parts. Well, most of them have 4. Cogitavi, cogitatum. We have to know them all eventually to use them. Cogito, cogitari, cogitavi, cogitatum. If you remember, that's a normal first, right? Almost every first conjugation verb has the same principal parts. If you learn one, you've learned them all. So let's look at our list. Amo, amari, amawi, amatum, love. You already know that one? It's got normal parts. Cogito, we just looked at it. Skip down to ero, E-R-R-O. Ero, erari, erawi, eratum. Do you hear how it's the same parts? It's just the word is different, but the endings are the same. Ero means wander, err, or make a mistake. Laudo, laudari, laudawi, laudatum. Praise, same endings. Look down to serwo, serwo, serwari, serwawi, serwatum. Save, keep, guard. And the next one is very much like it. Conservo, conservari, conservawi, conservatum. Preserve, conserve. And then skip down to woko, the last one. Woko, wokari, wokawi, wokatum. If you've learned one of them, you've learned the principal parts of all of them. It's done. There's only one word on this list that's first conjugation and it's weird. And it's do. And you've already met it. Do, dari, dedi, datum. If you say that enough times, it just will never leave you. You'll be like senile and 100 years old, and all you remember is do, dari, dedi, datum. It'll just stick in there. That's not a promise or a threat, as the case may be. That's the only one that's different. So if you remember that do is different and learn it, then the rest of them you know. And I think that we have definitely met amo and woko. The biggest one that's hard to remember is servo doesn't mean serve, because we want it to mean serve. It means save. Okay, so that's first conjugation. Let's look at second conjugation. Which one? Video. We're not using video as our model because video is weird. Let's use debio as our model. Debio, debere, long ere, debui, debitum. This is a normal second conjugation. Most of them have these exact same endings. Debio, debere, debui, debitum. By the way, this means owe or ought. Like use debit card, right? Debit means I owe you this much. You're taking this much out of my account. A debit in accounting means something you owe, right? But we also, it can mean ought. I ought to do this. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's look at other ones that are like it. Skip down to monio. Moneo, monere, monui, monitum. We already know this one, warn. We've learned this one. Skip down to terio. Terio, terere, teriui, teritum. Frighten or terrify. It doesn't mean be frightened. It means to frighten someone else. But unfortunately, there are a few second conjugation verbs that are a little crazy. One of them is salvio. Find salvio. Salvio, salvere. It's only got two parts. It means be well, be in good health, and it can also mean hello. In certain forms that we're going to talk about in a minute. Look down to walio. Walio, walere, waliui, waliturum. Shoot. Ruined it on that last part. It means be strong or have power. It can also mean goodbye. Basically, if you're Roman and you're saying hello or goodbye to somebody, you're telling them to be well. You're just telling them to be well. And then we have widio, widere, weedy, weesum. That's not right at all. But we already learned it this year, and it means see. Those are your words. Many of them you know. Some of them are new. Hopefully they'll be fairly easy. I'm going to bring chapter 2 next week, but maybe I should bring some more chapter 1 practice in case we need it, but I don't think we're going to need it. Now, I need to remind you of one other thing we already learned this year, but we haven't done it very much, and it'll make the hello and goodbye make a little more sense. Sometimes I want to tell someone to do something. Do you remember the fancy name for this? For a command, we call it the imperative. Impero is the word that means command in Latin. So they call it the imperative mood. Shut the door. Eat your vegetables. Clean your room. And make it sound like your parents are. Like, I'm just coming up with things you might hear, but that's really nasty. Have a cookie. See, that was a nice one. These are commands. Do you remember how we give commands in Latin? We did learn this, but then I don't think they did it very much in the workbook. How do I tell someone? Let's use cogito. How do I tell a person, think? Think about it. I'm giving you a command. I go to the infinitive and I take away the RE, and that is a command to one person. You, think about it. What if I want all of you to think about it? I want to tell all of you to do it. Brilliant, Luke. All right. I add a TE. All of you do it. Let's try it with a second. How do I tell someone I don't know how that's not really something you'd command someone to do, but let's do it anyway. How would I command one person, owe him money? Just say it again.
Debe.
Yeah. And then how do I tell more than one person to do it? Mm-hmm. Now, this makes hello and goodbye make a little more sense. Look at the salvio. Look at your list and look at the entry for salvio. And read across, and it says salve, salvete. Do you see what that is? It's the commands, right? So when I say salve, I'm saying to one person, be well, be in good health. And if I say salvete, I'm selling it to a group of you, be well. And then look down at walio. Wale, walete, goodbye. It's another command. That's all those are. They're the command forms of be strong, be good, be well. That's why they look like that. They're the commands. That, I am telling you, is the entire contents of chapter 1 of Wheelock's Latin. And you know it all already. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Turn the page. And you see it says sententiae. Oh, you turned too many pages. That's okay. Sententiae, sentences. I want you to translate these sentences. If there's something you don't know, like look at number 5. Saipe peccamus. They know they didn't teach you pecco, so they told you pecco peccare means sin. They tell you right there. It's not like these where, oh, where's the vocabulary list? Maybe they gave it to me, maybe they didn't. It's not like that. It's right after it, okay? Look at number 14. They use the word bis, and they use the word keto, and it tells you right after. It says bis, adverb, and then italics it says twice. Bis means twice. And then after it says bisect, bicycle. These are examples of words that use bi or bis twice, right? If you bisect, you cut it in 2 parts. A bicycle obviously has 2 wheels. So the thing that's in italics that's slanty is what it means in English. And then the other things are just information about it. Does that make sense? So let's look at number 1. We're just going to look at number 1 together. Labor me vocat. It says note, subject, object, verb, word order. We've already learned this. Usually they put the subject first, then they put the direct object, and then they put the verb at the end. We've been doing that all year. Then it says labor. It doesn't tell you what it means, but it says laboratory, elaborate, a noun, and one of hundreds of Latin words that come into English with their spelling unchanged. So what do you think labor means? It says it comes into English with its spelling unchanged. Labor, work. Labor means labor. So I know that now. So let's look back at labor me vocat. If I don't remember what me means, I can always look back at my list and say, me means me. What does labor me vocat mean? How about if we stick with vocat? Let's just stick with the verb first. What does vocat mean? Call. And who calls? He shear it. Is there something that could be the he shear it? Well, because we don't say me calls. I don't ever say me calls. There's only one more choice.
Labor.
Labor calls may.
Work calls me.
Work calls me. In other words, I gotta go. Work calls me. I got something to do. Got to run some errands. Does that make sense? Let's take a look at number 2. Monet may. Okay, Monet. That's kind of weird, but you know what it looks like to me? It looks like one of these deals. What does monio mean? Worn. So Monet. What is that form of monio?
It would be a command.
It's a command. Warn. Warn who? Monet may.
Me.
Warn me. See arrow. Now I might have to look back and remind myself that see means if. See arrow. If you need to flip back and see what arrow means, you can. You flip back to what? Oh, that's RO. This is ERRO. And it's arrow.
Me if I wander.
Warn me if I wander, or warn me if I make a mistake. Warn me if I err. And then it says this weird amabote. I will love you. Like, what? Okay, look back to amo. You know about this already, don't you? Look at the on the vocabulary for amo. Amo means lover like, and then it says amabote is an idiom. It's a phrase. It means please. Literally, it means I will love you. Whenever the Romans say please, what they really say is I will love you. Pass me the salt. I will love you. It's their phrase for please. You do not have to write I will love you. Warn me if I err, please. Does that make sense? Notice what I did. Do you see how it was divided up with commas and a hyphen? I just attacked one section at a time. I don't want to attack the whole thing at a time. Attack one little bit. That's why they gave you commas. Let's look at number 3. We want to do this one together because you don't know either of these words. Festina lente. Now let's read everything in the parentheses. A favorite saying of the Emperor Augustus. Festino, festinari means hasten or make haste. So if festino, festinari means hasten, what does festina mean? And again, look what we got here. Festina.
Be a command.
It's a command to do what?
To hasten.
Hasten. Hurry, hasten. Festina. And then it tells us at the end of that, in the parentheses, lente, adverb, slowly. Hasten, lente.
Hasten slowly.
Hasten slowly. Make haste slowly. You're like, what the heck does that mean? Augustus is whacked. No, it means we don't want to dawdle, but you have to be careful enough that you don't screw it up and have to go back and do it again. Have you ever heard shortcuts make long delays? All right. Sometimes when we do something really fast to get it over with, we end up spending more time on it because we screw it up and we have to go back and do it again. So his motto was make haste, get it done, but do it slowly enough that you don't screw it up and have to go back and redo it. Festina lente, make haste slowly. Let's do one more. Laudas me, culpant me. Let's take laudas me first. What is laudas? Give me everything you can get out of laudas.
It's present.
It is.
It's second person singular.
It is indeed.
You praise.
You praise me. You praise me. All right, we got the first half already done. Then we have a second half, culpant me. And they tell me that culpo culpare means blame. So what would culpant mean? They blame me. You praise me, they blame me. You get it? That's what we're going to do. I want you to do these. And the next page, there are 5 sentences for you to put into Latin. All right. Now look at the first sentence. What does he see? Think about that sentence. First of all, I'm going to make it not a question. He does see what? Right? I just unraveled it and made it not a question. What do I do with the word does? What's the word for does? Hint, hint. We just talked about this like 10 minutes ago. It's a trick question. There is no word for does. I mean, there is, but not this sort of does. Does see is the verb, right? Present tense. He sees, he is seeing, he does see. It all means it's present tense. Do not be sucked in by an is or a does, especially if it's a question, all right? So I only really need 2 words. I need 2 words. Somebody tell me the Latin for he does see. We've learned the word for see. How would I write he sees, he is seeing, he does see? You're really close. Video, wides, widet. Widet. So that means he does see. And the word for what is in my vocabulary. It says quid means what? Quid. Done. I can write those 4 words in 2 words. Does that make sense? So don't freak out. It's like they, look at the number 17. They are giving nothing. Like, oh, what's the word for art? No. They are giving. That's going to be 1 word in Latin. Right? Make sense? All right. One last note. I want you to do those. And then do you see these sentences? The poet Horace contemplates an invitation. We even have pictures, all right, of Horace and Virgil. I want you to translate those few sentences there, all right? Underneath it, there's a little paragraph that tells you who Horace is, which you may or may not care about. I even cut it off. It went on to the next page, and I didn't even make a copy of that page. But it's only the Latin part. And notice that Maecenas and Virgil, they're names of people, all right? And it tells you down here, Horace, Virgil, and in the house of Maecenas, it tells you. One more thing so that you can do this. And I'm going to give you this one. Remember that the infinitive of a verb, what does it mean? How do I translate amari? To love. How do I translate cogitare? I mean, think, by the way, cogito means think. To think. Now, listen to this. Whenever I use the word ought, debet, for example, he ought. It could mean he owes. But a lot of times it means he ought. What do I say in English right after I use the word ought? Every time. You ought to. I always use an infinitive because I don't ever just say you ought to. I always say you ought to do something. You ought to eat, you ought to play, you ought to sing, you ought to sleep. So he ought to love. He ought to think. Do you see how whenever you run into this verb, you're often going to run into an infinitive in the same sentence? We do it in English every time we say ought. Okay. I want you to take the test. And then for the remainder of the week, I'd like you to work on familiarizing yourself with the vocabulary to the best that you're able and work your way through the sentences. And there's no key. We're doing them all next week together. All the sentences that we didn't do today, we're going to go over them together next week. All right. And we'll go through that little paragraph. And I will bring chapter 2 because chapter 2 is first declension nouns. You already know this, but this will be a really good way to cement in and also to be able to translate a little paragraph, not crazy like the ones they tried to give you in here, but are a little more doable. Okay. May I see that paper that I just gave you? Because I have one misgiving. Yeah, okay. So I think that I cut off on a second page a couple of words here. And so I need you to do this for me. I need you to write down here, let me write them on the board and then I'll give you this, Luke, and then in this little paragraph, it uses the word respondere, which means answer. I'm just going to write them down here. It uses culpo, which they already used in the sentences, which means blame. And it uses the word hodie, which means today. Okay, write those three things there in the margin, okay? So that when you run into them, you will know what they mean. Sorry about that. I didn't think about sometimes in those paragraphs underneath, they tell you. All right, are we good? And we will just work, we're not good. We'll just work on this for the rest of the school year. And then we'll probably switch back. Luke, if you're, the only one with me, or we'll probably just start back at chapter 1 again, and we'll have a few weeks that are really easy because maybe over the summer, you'll forget things. But, and I'm hoping to work through the first 8 or 10 chapters of that book, at least 8 chapters, but we'll probably get 10 because half of it you know already. It's raining again. All right. Are we good? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn the video off.